Between East and West power emerged. A silent Iranian empire took position, neither fully Eastern or Western aligned. Parthia ruled the crossroads of worlds. This empire dominated Persia and Mesopotamia, ancient lands rich with memory conflict. Rivers, cities, deserts obeyed Parthian rule. Geography became their strategic advantage. Parthian rule began to 407 BCE. It endured centuries of shifting pressure. Empires fell around its borders, yet Parthia remained standing resilient for nearly 500 restless years, from BCE into CE transition. Their presence shaped ancient geopolitics. Time tested their adaptable power. Rome eventually faced this eastern rival. Legions marched confident toward unfamiliar lands, but Parthian resistance shattered Roman expectations. Eagles fell in desert silence. Rivalry with the Roman Empire defined Parthian legend. Battles ended without clear victors often. Stalemate replaced conquest domination dreams. Balance of power reshaped ancient strategy. Cavalry formed Parthian military soul. Horse archers struck, vanished, returned swiftly. Famous Parthian Shot confused terrified enemies. War became movement, deception, mastery. Heavy cataphracts charged like living armor. Steel horses shattered disciplined infantry lines. Rome learned fear of Eastern tactics. Battlefields favored speed, not formation. Diplomacy matched warfare in importance. Local kings ruled under Parthian influence. Loose control ensured loyalty, flexibility, survival. Empire governed through balance, not force. The Parthian Empire faded quietly eventually, replaced by new Persian ambition rising. Yet its shadow shaped Rome and Asia. A forgotten master of equilibrium. In ancient steppes of Central Asia, a leader quietly shaped future empires. His name echoed across nomadic tribes. History remembers him as Arsacid. Arsacid emerged during turbulent regional times. Power shifted between fading Hellenistic rulers. Local tribes sought strength and independence. Opportunity arose for bold, decisive leadership. Born among hardy steppe nomads, Arsacid understood survival through unity. He inspired loyalty through courage and vision. His presence commanded respect without crowns. The Pani tribe followed Arsacid faithfully. They lived mobile lives across vast plains, skilled in horse riding and archery. Nomadic discipline forged their warrior identity. Arsacid transformed tribal leadership into kingship. He united scattered clans under one banner. This unity became the foundation of new power. A state began forming from moving tents. Seleucid authority weakened across eastern territories. Distant rulers failed controlling frontier regions. Arsacid recognized the perfect historical moment. Resistance slowly turned into organized rebellion. Through strategy, not sheer numbers, Arsacid challenged established imperial control. Guerrilla tactics favored swift mounted forces. Seleucid garrisons struggled against mobility. Victory brought legitimacy among local peoples. Arsacid was declared supreme ruler. His authority now extended beyond tribe. A new political identity was born. This marked birth of Parthian state. Small beginnings carried grand future ambitions. Arsacid adopted royal traditions carefully. Blending nomadic customs with settled governance, he avoided excessive Hellenistic influence, preserving native traditions and beliefs. This cultural balance strengthened popular support. People saw him as their own ruler. The name Arsacid became royal title. Future kings adopted it symbolically. This honored the founding father's legacy, ensuring continuity of his authority. Coins minted bore his strong image. Symbols projected power and sovereignty. These coins spread his recognition widely, legitimizing rule across conquered lands. Arsacid ruled with pragmatic wisdom. He focused on stability, not luxury. Securing borders remained his priority. Expansion followed only when necessary. His death did not end vision. Foundations he laid proved enduring. The empire outlived many great powers, all tracing origin back to Arsacid. Thus Parthian history begins with one man, a nomad turned empire founder. Arsacid shaped destiny through determination. His legacy defines centuries of rule. The Pani were nomads of vast steppes, They lived between deserts and grasslands. Movement defined their survival and culture. Freedom shaped their collective identity. Life for Pani demanded constant adaptation. Harsh climates tested endurance daily. Scarcity taught discipline and cooperation. Only strongest bonds ensured survival. They mastered horse riding from childhood. Speed became their greatest advantage. Mounted archery defined Pani warfare. Enemies feared their sudden swift attacks. Social structure relied on tribal loyalty. Leadership earned through merit and bravery. Respect came from protection and guidance. This tradition shaped future Parthian rule. The Pani migrated southward gradually, searching for fertile lands and opportunity. Pressure from rival tribes pushed movement. History guided them toward Iranian plateau. Their nomadic lifestyle bred resilience. They feared neither distance nor hardship. Every journey strengthened collective confidence. Mobility became strategic political strength. Unlike settled empires bound by cities, Pani forces struck and vanished quickly. They avoided prolonged open confrontations. This frustrated traditional imperial armies. Cultural identity remained fiercely independent. They resisted foreign domination instinctively. External rulers struggled to control them. Freedom was non-negotiable for Pani. Contact with settled societies increased exposure. Trade introduced wealth and new ideas, yet Pani preserved core traditions carefully. Assimilation never meant cultural surrender. Military success boosted tribal confidence. Victories attracted allied clans nearby. Numbers slowly increased under strong leadership. Pani influence expanded beyond nomadic circles. Arsacid's unified Pani ambitions. He channeled tribal strength toward statehood. Nomadic unity evolved into political vision. A people became more than wanderers. Transition from tribe to kingdom began. Nomads learned administration and governance, yet retained flexible, adaptive mindsets. This balance proved historically powerful. The Pani identity shaped Parthian character. Independence remained central imperial value. Kings ruled, but never fully centralized. Tribal autonomy influenced imperial structure. Even as empire grew vast, nomadic roots stayed deeply influential. Cavalry dominance reflected tribal heritage. Mobility defined Parthian military doctrine. Foreign observers misunderstood their system, calling it loose or decentralized, yet this flexibility ensured long survival. Rigid empires fell, while Parthia endured. Thus Parthian rise was unconventional. Born not from cities or palaces, but from tents, wines and horses. Nomads reshaped ancient imperial history. The Seleucid rulers controlled vast territories. Their power stretched from Anatolia eastward, yet distance weakened their central authority. Eastern provinces remained poorly governed. Local populations felt ignored by distant kings. Heavy taxation burdened frontier communities. Greek officials misunderstood regional traditions. Resentment quietly grew among Eastern peoples. The Seleucid Empire relied on garrisons. These outposts were scattered and undermanned. Supply lines stretched across hostile terrain. Rapid response became nearly impossible. Arsacid observed these imperial weaknesses. He studied Seleucid military habits carefully. Rigid formations limited their adaptability. Nomadic tactics offered decisive advantage. Initial resistance began as small raids, targeting isolated Seleucid detachments. Swift attacks avoided direct confrontation. Psychological pressure weakened enemy morale. Local support strengthened the rebellion. Communities welcomed relief from imperial control. Arsacid's promised protection and fair rule. Trust formed between leader and people. Seleucid commanders underestimated the threat. They viewed Pani resistance as temporary. Failure to act decisively proved costly. Rebellion gained irreversible momentum. Terrain favored the insurgents strongly. Open plains suited mounted warfare perfectly. Seleucid infantry struggled to keep pace. Speed repeatedly decided battlefield outcomes. Each victory increased Arsacid's legitimacy. More warriors joined his growing force. Allied tribes pledged loyalty voluntarily. Revolt transformed into organized movement. Imperial reinforcements arrived too late. Coordination issues plagued Seleucid responses. Internal conflicts distracted central leadership. Eastern defense became secondary priority. Arsacid avoided pitched battles deliberately. He chose timing and location carefully. Attrition slowly exhausted imperial resources. Patience became strategic weapon. Eventually, Seleucid authority collapsed regionally. Garrisons surrendered or withdrew westward. Administrative control dissolved rapidly. A power vacuum emerged across Parthia. This revolt marked permanent separation. Parthia ceased recognizing Seleucid sovereignty. Independence was no longer negotiable. A new state asserted its existence. The success inspired neighboring regions. Other groups challenged Hellenistic domination. Seleucid decline accelerated across East. Parthians became symbol of resistance. Arsacid secured borders after victory. Stability replaced constant conflict gradually. Institutions replaced temporary war leadership. Revolt matured into sovereign governance. Thus, rebellion reshaped regional power balance. Seleucid dominance faded from Iranian lands. Parthians emerged as independent force. History turned through calculated resistance. Victory demanded more than battlefield success. Power required structure, legitimacy, continuity. Arsacid understood rule must endure, not vanish with one leader's death. He established a ruling royal house. This house ensured stable succession. Authority passed through family lineage, creating long-term political continuity. Thus the Arsacid line was founded. Kings traced power back to Arsacid. Bloodline became symbol of rightful rule. Dynasty legitimized Parthian sovereignty. The Arsacid dynasty blended traditions. Nomadic customs merged with Iranian kingship. This hybrid model appealed to many groups. Unity emerged across diverse populations. Royal authority remained deliberately flexible. Local rulers retained regional autonomy. Central power avoided excessive control. This prevented widespread internal revolts. Kings ruled as first among nobles. Council support balanced royal decisions. This system reflected tribal governance roots. Power depended on loyalty, not absolutism. Dynastic symbols reinforced royal identity. Coins depicted consistent royal imagery. Titles emphasized divine favor and legitimacy. Public perception strengthened dynastic authority. Succession avoided strict primogeniture rules. Strength competence often determined inheritance. This reduced weak leadership risks. Though internal disputes sometimes occurred, the dynasty maintained continuity despite conflicts. External wars tested leadership repeatedly. Yet Arsacid lineage survived assassinations. Longevity became its greatest strength. Relations with nobility were carefully managed. Great houses wielded regional influence. Kings negotiated rather than dominated. Balance ensured imperial cohesion. The dynasty embraced cultural tolerance. Greek, Iranian, and local customs coexisted. This inclusivity stabilized diverse populations. Empire avoided forced cultural assimilation. Religion remained decentralized under Arsacids. Local beliefs continued without interference. Kings avoided theological enforcement. Spiritual freedom reinforced political loyalty. Dynastic memory was actively preserved. Founders were honored through rituals. Arsacid became almost legendary figure. Myth strengthened dynastic legitimacy. Over generations, Arsacid rule expanded. Territories stretched from Mesopotamia eastward. Dynasty adapted to new challenges. Flexibility sustained imperial growth. Even Rome later recognized Arsacid power. Diplomatic marriages and treaties followed. Parthia stood equal among great empires. Dynasty commanded international respect. Thus, Arsacid dynasty shaped Parthian identity. More than rulers, they defined system. Their legacy endured nearly 5 centuries. A rare achievement in ancient history. With stability achieved at the center, Parthian ambitions naturally turned outward. Security required controlling surrounding regions. Expansion became strategic necessity. Iranian plateau offered immense opportunities. Fertile lands supported growing populations. Trade routes crossed key strategic corridors. Control meant wealth, influence, and power. Arsacid rulers advanced cautiously eastward. They avoided reckless territorial overreach. Each conquest was carefully consolidated. Stability always preceded further movement. Local rulers often submitted peacefully. Parthians respected existing power structures. Autonomy was exchanged for loyalty. This minimized resistance and rebellion. Military expansion relied on cavalry dominance. Open Iranian landscapes favored mounted warfare. Parthian horse archers excelled here. Speed overwhelmed slower opposing forces. Cities were not immediately destroyed. Parthians preferred negotiated transitions. Economic continuity remained intact. This won acceptance from urban populations. The region of Parthia itself stabilized first, from their influence radiated outward. Neighboring provinces felt growing pressure. Submission often followed demonstration of strength. The name Iran gained unity, previously fragmented under weak control. Parthians provided new political cohesion. Regional identity slowly reformed. Trade networks expanded with territorial growth. Silk Road connections increased dramatically. Revenue strengthened royal authority. Commerce became backbone of expansion. Hellenistic influence declined steadily. Greek administrative systems were adapted, not completely removed or rejected. Cultural blending remained deliberate policy. Military governors secured newly gained regions, yet harsh occupation was avoided. Local elites retained traditional privileges. This reduced long-term unrest. Expansion also protected Parthian heartlands. Buffer zones absorbed external threats. Enemies were pushed farther away. Security reinforced imperial confidence. Each successful campaign enhanced royal prestige. Kings gained recognition among nobles. Legitimacy increased through territorial success. Power became visibly undeniable. Borders expanded toward Mesopotamia gradually. This brought Parthians closer to Roman world. Future conflicts were quietly approaching, yet foundations were firmly laid. The empire remained loosely federated. Unity came from loyalty, not coercion. This model suited vast Iranian lands. Central collapse was avoided. Thus early expansion defined Parthian strength, not explosive, but steady and calculated. Iran became core of imperial identity, a foundation for centuries ahead. If you enjoyed this documentary journey, please like and share this video. Subscribe for more untold histories, and stay connected with the past. The Parthian Empire followed unique governance. Unlike rigid centralized ancient states, power was shared across many regions. Decentralization defined Parthian political identity. This system resembled early feudal structures. Land was controlled by powerful elites. Loyalty mattered more than bureaucracy. Authority flowed through personal relationships. The central government remained relatively small. There was no massive imperial administration. Local leaders handled daily governance. This reduced burden on royal authority. Regions differed greatly in culture. Languages, customs, and traditions varied widely. Decentralization allowed peaceful coexistence. Uniform rule was never imposed. Military obligations replaced heavy taxation. Local lords provided troops when required. Service ensured continued autonomy. This created mutual dependence between rulers. The king relied on noble cooperation. Direct control was neither practical nor desired. Negotiation replaced constant enforcement. Politics thrived through alliances and compromise. This structure increased imperial flexibility. Local crises were handled regionally, so central responses were unnecessary. Stability improved across vast territories. However, decentralization carried inherent risks. Overpowerful nobles could challenge kings. Internal rivalries sometimes weakened unity. Balance required constant political skill. The system evolved from nomadic traditions. Tribal governance influenced imperial design. shared power felt natural to Parthians. Absolute monarchy was culturally unfamiliar. Unlike Roman provincial systems, Parthia avoided uniform legal codes. Justice was administered locally. Customary laws remained respected. Decentralization also aided imperial longevity. When one region weakened, others endured. Collapse was rarely total or sudden. Resilience defined Parthian survival. Foreign observers misunderstood this structure, calling it chaotic or ineffective. Yet Parthia resisted Rome for centuries, proof of functional governance. Economic systems adapted locally as well. Trade taxation differed by region. This encouraged regional prosperity. Economic diversity strengthened overall empire. Communication relied on personal envoys. Written bureaucracy remained limited. Trust and reputation guided politics. Honor played crucial administrative role. This model required strong leadership skills. Kings balanced persuasion with authority. Successful rulers mastered noble relationships. Failure led to internal fragmentation. Thus Parthian decentralization was deliberate. Not weakness, but strategic choice. It reflected geography, culture, history. A system uniquely suited to Parthia. At the empire's center stood the king. He symbolized unity across diverse lands. Supreme authority rested in his position, yet power was exercised with restraint. The Arsacid king ruled by legitimacy, bloodline traced back to Arsaces. This lineage justified royal supremacy. Ancestral authority strengthened obedience. Kings held ultimate military command. They directed major campaigns personally. Victory enhanced royal prestige greatly. Defeat weakened political standing quickly. Royal courts moved between major regions. There was no fixed capital city. Mobility reflected nomadic heritage. Presence reinforced authority across empire. The king mediated disputes among nobles. His judgment preserved internal stability. Neutral authority prevented civil wars. Balance depended on his wisdom. Although supreme ruler in theory, kings rarely governed directly everywhere. Delegation remained essential to rule. Trust replaced constant supervision. Coinage served royal propaganda purpose. King's image appeared on minted coins. Symbols communicated power and legitimacy. Subjects recognized authority visually. The Arsacid king maintained foreign diplomacy. He negotiated treaties and alliances. Rome, China, and nomads engaged him. International status elevated Parthian power. Religious authority was deliberately limited. Kings avoided claiming divine status. This prevented conflict with local beliefs. Tolerance reinforced loyalty among subjects. Royal succession required noble approval. Coronation involved elite consensus. Kingship depended on acceptance, not merely hereditary right. Personal charisma shaped royal effectiveness. Strong kings unified empire successfully. Weak rulers faced internal resistance. Leadership quality mattered immensely. Royal justice remained symbolic rather than intrusive. Kings judged major cases personally. Local courts handled daily matters. This limited resentment towards central rule. Kings rewarded loyalty generously. Land titles and privileges were granted. Patronage strengthened noble allegiance. Mutual benefit sustained hierarchy. Public ceremonies reinforced royal image. Audience rituals emphasized hierarchy. Kings displayed wealth and dignity. Symbolism replaced bureaucratic control. Military success legitimized reign strongly. Peaceful borders increased noble cooperation. War failure invited political challenges. Authority constantly required reinforcement. Thus Arsacid king ruled as arbiter, supreme yet not absolute. Power balanced through negotiation. A kingship shaped by consensus. Parthian politics relied heavily on nobility. Great families controlled vast territories. Their influence rivaled royal authority. Power was distributed, not monopolized. These noble houses owned large estates. Land provided wealth, military resources. Control over regions ensured independence. Kings depended on their cooperation. Nobles maintained private armies. They supplied cavalry during wars. Military strength enhanced political leverage. Kings negotiated rather than commanded. Among them stood the House of Seuran. This family held ceremonial privileges. They crowned new Arsacid kings. Symbolic power reinforced noble importance. Such families traced ancient lineages. Ancestry granted legitimacy and prestige. Older bloodlines commanded natural respect. Tradition strengthened their political standing. Nobles governed provinces autonomously. They collected taxes, administered justice. Local loyalty centered on noble houses. Royal presence remained limited regionally. Marriage alliances tied nobles to royalty. Family bonds secured political unity. Intermarriage reduced rebellion risks. Kinship stabilized imperial structure. However, noble ambition carried dangers. Rivalries sometimes escalated into conflict. Power struggles weakened central authority. Civil unrest occasionally erupted. Strong kings managed nobles carefully. They balanced rewards with subtle pressure. Favor shifted to prevent dominance. Political skill ensured survival. Nobles influenced royal succession heavily. Support determined legitimacy of new kings. Without noble backing, reigns failed. Consensus defined political continuity. Cultural patronage enhanced noble prestige. They sponsored temples, cities, and trade. Local populations benefited directly. This reinforced popular loyalty. Nobles also acted as regional defenders. They repelled invasions independently. This reduced burden on central army. Security became decentralized strength. Foreign powers recognized noble influence. Diplomats negotiated with families directly. Rome often exploited internal rivalries. Politics extended beyond royal court. Despite conflicts, nobles upheld empire. They valued Parthian independence collectively. Foreign domination threatened their privileges. Unity emerged against external enemies. The system rewarded cooperation over rebellion. Nobles prospered under stable Arsacid rule. Total fragmentation was avoided. Balance preserved imperial longevity. Thus, powerful noble families shaped governance. Neither servants nor usurpers alone. They were pillars of Parthian state. Strength and vulnerability intertwined. Parthian rule extended over diverse regions. Not all lands were governed directly. Many areas retained their own kings. Vassalage defined imperial expansion. These client kingdoms acknowledged Arsacid supremacy. They paid tribute and provided troops. Internal affairs remained largely independent. Autonomy ensured local stability. Vassal rulers kept traditional titles. Cultural customs remained untouched. Local populations accepted familiar leadership. Resistance against Parthians stayed minimal. This system reduced administrative burden. Central government avoided direct governance. Distance made strict control impractical. Delegation became strategic necessity. Military cooperation defined vassal obligations. In wartime, armies joined Parthian forces. Cavalry contingents strengthened imperial campaigns. Shared defense bound empire together. Buffer states protected Parthian heartlands. They absorbed initial enemy invasions. Roman advances often stalled here. Security benefited entire empire. Kings of vassal states sought royal favor. Recognition from Arsacid court legitimized rule. Titles, gifts, and marriages reinforced loyalty. Prestige ensured continued allegiance. However, loyalty was not guaranteed forever. Weak central authority invited defection. Some vassals shifted allegiance opportunistically. Diplomacy required constant attention. Parthian kings intervened when necessary. Rebellious rulers were replaced strategically. Direct annexation remained rare. Stability outweighed territorial control. Trade flourished through vassal regions. Local kings maintained commercial routes. Imperial markets benefited collectively. Economic integration strengthened political unity. Cultural exchange increased under this system. Iranian, Greek, and local traditions blended. Diversity enriched imperial identity. Tolerance prevented cultural friction. Rome misunderstood vassal autonomy, assuming weakness in loose control. Yet flexibility sustained Parthian resistance. Rigid empires struggled in comparison. Vassal kingdoms acted as diplomats too. They mediated between Parthia and neighbors. Frontier diplomacy reduced direct confrontation. Indirect rule proved effective. This model encouraged gradual expansion. Influence spread without costly wars. Prestige replaced constant conquest. Empire grew through attraction. Thus semi-autonomous kingdoms defined Parthia. Power flowed through layered authority. Unity existed without uniformity. A sophisticated ancient political system. Parthian governance relied on careful balance. Neither center nor regions dominated completely. Stability emerged through shared authority. Power was constantly negotiated. The king represented imperial unity. Local rulers ensured regional order. Each depended upon the other. Mutual reliance prevented fragmentation. Central authority handled foreign policy, war diplomacy, and royal succession. Local powers managed daily administration. Clear division reduced internal conflict. Too much centralization risked rebellion. Too much autonomy risked disintegration. Parthian rulers avoided both extremes. Balance remained strategic priority. Nobles and vassals expected respect. Their traditions were rarely overridden. Royal interference stayed limited. Trust maintained long-term loyalty. The king used rewards, not force, land grants, titles, and honors. Patronage reinforced allegiance effectively. Violence was last resort. Local powers responded with military support. They defended borders and trade routes. Security became collective responsibility. Empire functioned as cooperative network. This system adapted to leadership quality. Strong kings centralized slightly when needed. Weaker kings conceded more autonomy. Flexibility preserved imperial continuity. Communication relied on personal relationships. Envoys conveyed royal intentions. Reputation shaped political outcomes. Honor replaced written bureaucracy. Cultural tolerance supported political balance. Different religions practiced freely. Local identities were protected. Unity did not require uniformity. Economic systems mirrored political structure. Regions controlled their revenues. Tribute flowed upward selectively. Wealth circulation remained balanced. When balance failed, conflict erupted. Civil wars exposed system fragility, yet recovery was often swift. Structure allowed restabilization. Foreign enemies struggled, exploiting divisions. Despite internal diversity, Parthia resisted Rome. Shared independence united elites. External pressure reinforced internal cohesion. The empire endured nearly 5 centuries. Few ancient states matched longevity. Balance between powers proved effective. Adaptability ensured survival. Thus Parthian governance was dynamic. Not static, rigid, or absolute. Strength lay in compromise. A lesson in ancient statecraft. Parthian military strength centered on cavalry. Horsemen formed the empire's core force. Infantry played only supporting roles. Speed defined Parthian battlefield dominance. From youth warriors trained on horseback, riding was learned before walking properly. Balance control and endurance developed early. This created natural cavalry superiority. Cavalry units were highly disciplined. They operated with exceptional coordination. Commands were understood through signals. Flexibility replaced rigid formation fighting. Light cavalry formed majority of forces. They carried bows and light armor. Mobility allowed rapid battlefield repositioning. Enemies struggled matching their pace. Mounted archers attacked from distance. They avoided close combat initially. Constant movement reduced enemy effectiveness. Harassment slowly exhausted opposing armies. Elite cavalry required minimal supply lines. They lived off land efficiently. This allowed long campaigns without logistics. Parthians struck where least expected. Horses were carefully bred and trained. Strong, resilient steppe horses were preferred. Endurance mattered more than sheer size. Animal quality directly affected victory. Cavalry warfare suited Parthian geography. Open plains favored mounted combat. Narrow formations became liabilities. Terrain amplified Parthian strengths. Armor varied based on role. Some cavalry wore light protection. Others carried heavier defensive gear. Flexibility existed within cavalry ranks. Training emphasized individual skill. Archery accuracy, while riding was essential. Quick turns, retreats, and charges. Every rider acted as mobile unit. Commanders relied on adaptability. Plans changed dynamically during combat. Cavalry allowed instant tactical shifts. Enemy plans collapsed under unpredictability. Psychological impact was significant. Fast-moving riders intimidated opponents. Dust clouds and constant motion confused enemies. Fear weakened organized resistance. Unlike rigid infantry armies, Parthian cavalry avoided fixed engagements. They controlled tempo of battles. Initiative always remained with them. This system reduced casualties significantly. Avoidance of direct clashes preserved forces. Victory came through attrition and morale. Efficiency replaced brute force warfare. Cavalry dominance shaped Parthian identity. Military culture revolved around horsemen. Elite riders symbolized imperial power. Warfare became art of movement. Thus, elite cavalry defined Parthian warfare. It was not supplementary, but foundational. Empire survived through mounted superiority, a legacy unmatched in ancient warfare. Among ancient warfare tactics, one maneuver became legendary. It shocked enemies across battlefields. Known famously as Parthian Shot, this tactic involved feigned retreat. Cavalry appeared to flee in disorder. Enemies pursued believing victory assured. This illusion formed tactical foundation, while retreating riders turned suddenly. They fired arrows backward accurately. Shots were released at full gallop. Precision defied conventional expectations. The tactic required exceptional skill. Archers trained relentlessly from youth. Balance, strength, and coordination combined. Only elite horsemen mastered this move. Enemies found pursuit extremely dangerous. Chasing forces broke their formations. Cohesion dissolved during reckless advance. This created fatal vulnerability. Parthians exploited this moment perfectly. Arrows rained upon disorganized pursuers. Confusion spread rapidly through enemy ranks. Morale collapsed before physical losses. The Parthian shot depended on deception. Psychology mattered as much as skill. False weakness lured enemies forward. Pride blinded tactical judgment. Roman and Hellenistic armies suffered greatly. Heavy infantry struggled changing direction. Armor slowed their reaction speed. Retreating cavalry remained unreachable. The tactic conserved Parthian manpower. Direct confrontation was carefully avoided. Distance ensured archer safety. Efficiency defined Parthian combat philosophy. Timing was absolutely critical. Premature firing ruined illusion. Delayed response risked capture. Perfect coordination ensured devastating effect. Communication relied on visual signals. Trumpets, flags, and movement cues. Every rider understood battle rhythm. Individual awareness replaced rigid command. Terrain influenced tactic effectiveness greatly. Open plains maximized maneuvering space. Narrow valleys reduced escape routes. Parthians chose battlegrounds deliberately. Repeated use amplified enemy fear. Opponents hesitated to pursue. This hesitation limited offensive options. Psychological dominance became strategic advantage. The Parthian shot required disciplined retreat. Chaos would destroy tactical purpose. Controlled withdrawal demanded training. Order existed beneath apparent disorder. Over time, enemies tried adapting, yet countering speed proved difficult. Few armies matched cavalry agility. Innovation failed against execution. This tactic symbolized Parthian ingenuity. They transformed retreat into weapon. Movement became offensive force. Warfare rules were fundamentally altered. Thus Parthian shot defined their legend. A blend of deception, speed, precision. It humbled mighty imperial armies, leaving lasting mark on military history. Alongside light cavalry existed heavy shock troops. These were the feared Parthian cataphracts. Elite warriors encased in full armor, designed to break enemy formations. Cataphracts wore armor from head to toe. Metal scales protected torso, limbs, and face. Even horses were heavily armored, creating unstoppable moving fortresses. Their weapons differed from mounted archers. Long lances replaced bows in combat. Close-range impact was their purpose. They charged directly into enemy lines. Training cataphracts required immense resources. Armor was expensive and time-consuming. Only nobility could afford such equipment. Thus, elite status defined these warriors. The cataphracts demanded discipline, weight-limited speed, and flexibility. Coordination during charges was essential. Chaos would render armor useless. Cataphracts operated after enemy disruption. Light cavalry softened targets first. Parthian Shot caused confusion and breaks. Then cataphracts delivered decisive blow. Their charges shattered infantry formations. Lances pierced shields and armor alike. Momentum multiplied destructive force. Few units could withstand impact. Roman legions feared these attacks greatly. Tight formations struggled absorbing shock. Once lines broke, panic spread rapidly. Armor offered little against momentum. Despite heavy equipment, cataphracts remained mobile. Horse strength compensated for added weight. Training emphasized endurance and control. Balance preserved battlefield effectiveness. They fought best on open terrain. Flat plains allowed full charging power. Rough ground reduced effectiveness. Parthians selected battlegrounds accordingly. Cataphracts symbolized Parthian elite warfare. They represented wealth, nobility, and power. Their appearance intimidated enemies instantly. Psychological impact preceded physical clash. Maintenance of armor was a continuous task. Rust damage and repairs demanded resources. Support networks followed elite units. Logistics remained vital despite mobility. Cataphracts rarely fought alone. They required coordination with archers. Combined arms strategy maximized success. Teamwork defined Parthian battle doctrine. Over time, enemies attempted imitation. Romans later developed similar heavy cavalry. Yet Parthian experience remained unmatched. Innovation stemmed from necessity and tradition. These units reinforced royal authority. Kings often led cataphracts personally. Presence inspired loyalty and fear. Elite troops embodied state power. Thus, cataphracts balanced Parthian warfare, speed paired with crushing force. Light and heavy cavalry complemented perfectly. A military system ahead of its time. One battle defined Parthian military genius. It shocked the ancient Mediterranean world. Rome faced unexpected catastrophic defeat. History remembers Carrhae forever. In 53 BCE, Roman forces advanced eastward. Led by ambitious General Marcus Crassus, he sought glory, wealth, and prestige. Underestimated Parthian warfare traditions. The Battle of Carrhae unfolded disastrously. Parthians avoided direct confrontation initially. They lured Romans deep into open plains. Terrain favored cavalry over infantry. Roman legions formed tight defensive squares. Heavy armor weighed soldiers down severely. Movement became slow and exhausting. Flexibility was almost non-existent. Parthian cavalry surrounded Roman formations. Mounted archers maintained constant distance. Arrows rained endlessly from all sides. Shields could not stop continuous volleys. The Parthian shot proved devastating. Retreating riders fired with deadly accuracy. Romans could not pursue effectively. Frustration weakened discipline and morale. Crassus waited for close combat, but Parthians denied such opportunity. They controlled distance throughout battle. Romans remained helpless under assault. Parthian supply camels carried endless arrows. This negated Roman attrition strategy. Ammunition never ran out. Psychological pressure intensified continuously. Roman counterattacks failed repeatedly. Heavy infantry struggled reaching fast cavalry. Fatigue mounted under desert heat. Cohesion began collapsing within ranks. Crassus' son Publius charged recklessly. Attempting to break Parthian lines, he was surrounded and killed. This shattered Roman morale completely. Parthian cataphracts launched decisive charges. Disorganized Roman units were overwhelmed. Lances crushed broken formations. Battle turned into complete rout. Negotiations followed amid chaos. Crassus was killed during parley. Roman leadership collapsed instantly. Army disintegrated without command. Thousands of Romans were killed or captured. Survivors were marched eastward as prisoners. Rome suffered one of worst defeats. Imperial confidence was deeply shaken. Parthians achieved victory with minimal losses. Superior tactics defeated numerical strength. Mobility triumphed over discipline. Warfare principles were redefined. Carrhae proved Rome was not invincible. Eastern warfare followed different rules. Parthian methods exposed Roman limitations. Balance of power dramatically shifted. The battle echoed 4 generations. Roman generals feared Eastern campaigns. Parthia and legendary reputation. Military respect was firmly established. Parthian warfare prioritized movement above all. Speed determined victory more than numbers. Static defense was never preferred. Motion became their greatest weapon. Armies avoided slow marching formations. They traveled light and fast. Supplies were minimized deliberately. Flexibility replaced logistical dependence. Heavy infantry limited battlefield options. Armor reduced speed and endurance. Rigid formations required strict discipline. Parthians rejected this fighting style. Mounted troops could choose engagement timing. They attacked when conditions favored them. Retreated instantly when threatened. Control over tempo ensured dominance. Speed allowed constant harassment tactics. Enemies were never given rest. Psychological fatigue set in quickly. Battles were won without direct clashes. Mobility enabled rapid strategic redeployment. Armies appeared where least expected. Borders were defended through movement. Surprise replaced permanent fortifications. Parthian forces exploited open landscapes. Plains, deserts, and steppes favored speed. Natural terrain amplified advantages. Geography became silent ally. Heavy infantry struggled adapting quickly. Turning formations required time. Parthians attacked during transitions. Moments of weakness were exploited. Speed reduced vulnerability to ambush. Quick withdrawal prevented encirclement. Losses remained minimal across campaigns. Preservation of force was strategic goal. Command decisions were executed instantly. Orders spread through movement patterns. Visual cues replaced verbal commands. Coordination thrived through shared training. Fast armies disrupted enemy supply lines. Slow convoys became easy targets. Starvation weakened opposing morale. Battles were often decided indirectly. Mobility allowed feigned retreats frequently. Enemies were lured into disadvantage. Overextension led to disaster. Speed created tactical illusions. This doctrine demanded constant training. Riders and horses formed single unit. Endurance was essential requirement. Weakness was eliminated early. Even in defeat, mobility ensured survival. Armies withdrew without collapse. Regrouping remained always possible. Total annihilation was rare. Over time, this approach proved superior. Heavily armored infantry declined regionally. Cavalry warfare reshaped military thought. Adaptation became necessary for survival. Thus, Parthian speed defined their warfare. Movement outweighed armor and mass. They mastered space and timing. A doctrine centuries ahead of rivals, Parthian prosperity rested on strategic geography. Empire lay between major ancient civilizations. East and West naturally intersected here. Trade routes became instruments of power. The Silk Road crossed Parthian lands. Caravans moved silk, spices, precious metals. Routes connected distant cultures and markets. Parthians stood at vital crossroads. Control of these routes was deliberate. Borders were secured around trade corridors. Banditry was suppressed systematically. Merchants traveled under imperial protection. Parthians did not produce all luxury goods, yet they controlled their movement effectively. Middleman role generated immense wealth. Access became more valuable than ownership. Strategic cities flourished along routes. Markets emerged around caravan stops. Urban growth followed commercial activity. Trade transformed regional landscapes. Customs posts regulated caravan movement. Officials recorded goods and origins. Taxes were collected without excessive burden. Fair systems encouraged continued commerce. Parthian rulers understood economic diplomacy. Trade stability meant political stability. Merchants supported rulers who ensured safety. Mutual benefit reinforced authority. Rome depended heavily on Eastern luxuries. Silk, spices, and gemstones were demanded. Parthians controlled flow westward. This leverage influenced foreign relations. Eastern kingdoms valued Parthian access. China and India sought secure routes. Parthians facilitated long-distance exchange. Trust built through reliability. Trade routes were defended militarily. Cavalry patrols protected caravan paths. Rapid response discouraged attacks. Security increased commercial confidence. Parthians avoided monopolizing merchants directly. They allowed private trade networks flourish. State benefited through regulation, restriction. Freedom stimulated higher trade volumes. Cultural exchange accompanied economic flow. Ideas, religions, and technologies traveled. Parthia became cultural intermediary. Trade reshaped identity and worldview. Revenue from trade funded military strength. Armies protected routes further. This created self-sustaining cycle. Commerce and security reinforced each other. Geography favored Parthian control naturally. Deserts and mountains channeled caravan movement. Alternative routes were limited. Control points were easily defended. Unlike maritime trade-dependent empires, Parthia dominated overland commerce. This insulated economy from naval rivals. Land power proved equally influential. Even rivals respected Parthian trade role. Direct confrontation risked economic disruption. Diplomacy often followed commercial interests. Trade shaped imperial strategy. Thus, control of Silk Road routes was cornerstone of Parthian economy. Wealth flowed through movement, not conquest. Commerce sustained imperial longevity. Parthia stood between three great worlds: Western Mediterranean, Eastern Asia, Southern India. Geography made interaction unavoidable. Trade became Parthia's greatest advantage. Roman markets craved Eastern luxuries. Silk, spices, pearls, precious stones. Demand fueled long-distance exchange. Parthians controlled intermediary access. From the east, goods arrived from China. Silk was most prized commodity. Light fabric symbolized status in Rome. Parthians regulated its westward flow. Indian merchants brought spices and textiles. Peppergems and aromatic substances. These goods passed through Parthian lands. Trade routes converged within empire. The Roman Empire relied heavily on imports. Trade deficits worried Roman economists. Gold flowed eastward constantly. Parthians benefited from this imbalance. Chinese traders rarely traveled west directly. Goods passed through multiple intermediaries. Parthians ensured safe transmission. Trust preserved long-distance commerce. Indian Ocean trade linked with land routes. Ports connected caravans to sea merchants. Parthians integrated maritime and overland trade. Economic networks expanded significantly. Parthians rarely interfered with pricing. Markets determined value naturally. Stability mattered more than control. Predictability encouraged repeated trade. Trade fostered diplomatic contact. Envoys often accompanied merchant caravans. Economic interests softened political tensions. Commerce acted as bridge between rivals. Cultural items traveled alongside goods. Art motifs, religious ideas, technologies. Parthia absorbed and transmitted influences. Identity became cosmopolitan and flexible. Merchants enjoyed legal protection. Contracts were respected across regions. Dispute resolution encouraged trust. Rule of law supported trade growth. Wealth accumulation strengthened noble families. Trade profits funded estates, armies. Economic power translated into political influence. Commerce reshaped internal power structures. Parthian cities thrived as trade hubs. markets attracted diverse populations. Urbanization followed commercial prosperity. Cosmopolitan centers emerged. Trade also brought strategic intelligence. Information traveled with merchants. Knowledge of foreign powers increased. Economic networks doubled as intelligence channels. Despite occasional conflict, trade persisted. Even during wars, commerce resumed quickly. Mutual dependence outweighed hostility. Economics restrained total warfare. Thus Parthia became economic connector, linking Rome, India, and China. Trade sustained empire's wealth and influence. A silent power shaping ancient globalization. Parthian economy relied on regulated movement. Trade passing through empire generated income. Control meant taxation without direct production. Revenue flowed through oversight, not labor. Customs stations were placed strategically. Key passes, roads, and caravan hubs. Officials monitored goods entering territories. Movement rarely went untaxed. Tolls were collected systematically. Rates varied by region and product. Luxury items carried higher duties. Essential goods were taxed lightly. This balanced system encouraged trade. Merchants preferred predictable costs. Arbitrary seizure was strictly avoided. Trust increased commercial traffic. Revenue from tolls supported royal treasury. Funds financed military campaigns. Cavalry maintenance required steady income. Trade indirectly funded imperial defense. Local authorities collected most taxes. Portions were forwarded to central court. Decentralized collection reduced corruption risks. Shared benefit encouraged cooperation. Caravan leaders kept official records. Goods quantities, origins, destinations. Documentation simplified tax assessment. Efficiency reduced disputes and delays. Customs revenue was continuous year-round. Unlike seasonal agricultural taxes, trade flowed regardless of harvest cycles. Economic stability improved significantly. Foreign merchants accepted Parthian tolls. They valued safety and route access. Protection justified taxation levels. Costs were seen as investment. Toll stations doubled as security posts. Guards protected merchants from bandits. Rapid cavalry response deterred attacks. Safety enhanced state legitimacy. Some tolls were paid in goods, silk, spices, precious metals. These items enriched royal stores. Treasuries held valuable reserves. Revenue distribution reinforced political loyalty. Nobles received shares of income. Vassal rulers benefited as well. Economic inclusion prevented rebellion. Excessive taxation was avoided deliberately. Overburdening merchants reduced traffic. Parthians understood economic limits. Long-term revenue mattered more. Trade income supported urban development. Cities expanded near customs hubs. Markets, workshops, and inns flourished. Economic activity multiplied regionally. Customs officials were closely supervised. Abuse threatened imperial reputation. Kings punished excessive exploitation. Fairness remained political necessity. Revenue flexibility helped during wartime. Trade routes adjusted quickly. Alternative corridors were utilized. Income rarely collapsed completely. Thus customs and tolls powered empire. Wealth flowed through regulation and security. Parthia mastered taxation without oppression. Economics sustained long imperial endurance, while trade enriched the empire. Agriculture sustained its population. Fertile lands ensured food security. Mesopotamia formed economic backbone. The region of Mesopotamia was exceptionally fertile. Rivers deposited rich alluvial soil. Seasonal floods renewed farmland naturally. Harvests were consistently abundant. Irrigation systems enhanced natural fertility. Canals diverted river water efficiently. Farmers controlled flooding carefully. Agricultural output increased significantly. Grain production dominated rural economy. Wheat and barley were staple crops. Surpluses supported urban populations. Food stability reduced social unrest. Dates were another major product. Palm groves lined riverbanks extensively. Dates served food and trade purposes. Economic value extended beyond subsistence. Livestock farming complemented crop production. Sheep, goats and cattle were raised. Animals provided meat, milk, wool. Agriculture remained diversified and resilient. Parthian rulers protected agricultural lands. Farms were spared during conflicts. Food supply was strategic priority. Starvation weakened military effectiveness. Taxation on farmers remained moderate. Excessive burden discouraged cultivation. Parthians valued long-term productivity. Stability mattered more than extraction. Local landowners managed estates independently. Nobles invested in irrigation maintenance. Productivity increased through elite involvement. Agriculture reinforced noble wealth. Surplus grain supplied armies during campaigns. Logistics relied on regional production. Short supply line reduced vulnerability. Military operations became more sustainable. Cities flourished near fertile zones. Urban centers depended on rural output. Markets redistributed agricultural goods. Economic interdependence strengthened unity. Agriculture supported population growth steadily. Rural stability reduced nomadic pressure. Settlement expanded across river valleys. Demographic strength increased imperial resilience. Droughts were mitigated through storage. Granaries preserved surplus harvests. State reserves stabilized bad years. Crisis management improved food security. Agricultural wealth balanced trade income. Economy avoided single-sector dependence. Food and commerce supported each other. Diversity reduced economic collapse risk. Foreign invasions targeted fertile regions. Enemies recognized Mesopotamia's value. Parthians defended these lands fiercely. Loss would cripple imperial economy. Thus Mesopotamian agriculture sustained Parthia. Trade brought wealth, but food gave life. Farms underpinned cities and armies. A quiet foundation of imperial strength. Parthian prosperity emerged from constant exchange. Goods, ideas and cultures moved freely. Commerce connected distant societies. Wealth flowed through interaction, not isolation. Trade created steady economic circulation. Money moved across regions continuously. This reduced dependence on conquest. Peace became economically valuable. Merchants formed backbone of prosperity. They linked cities, villages and empires. Movement generated opportunity everywhere. Trade networks replaced rigid economies. Urban centers benefited immensely. Markets attracted craftsmen and traders. Employment expanded across social classes. Cities grew wealthy and diverse. Commercial exchange encouraged specialization. Regions focused on comparative advantages. Some produced food, others crafts. Efficiency increased overall productivity. Wealth distribution was relatively balanced. Nobles, merchants, and cities all benefited. Economic inclusion reduced class resentment. Stability followed shared prosperity. Trade reduced internal conflict incentives. Economic loss discouraged rebellion. Cooperation became more profitable. Commerce acted as stabilizing force. Foreign demand strengthened domestic confidence. Parthians recognized their global importance. Economic relevance translated into political leverage. Prosperity enhanced diplomatic strength. Commercial taxes funded infrastructure. Roads, caravanserais, and markets improved. Better facilities attracted more merchants. Growth became self-reinforcing. Cultural tolerance supported economic growth. Foreign merchants felt welcomed. Religious freedom encouraged settlement. Diversity fueled innovation and creativity. Art and craftsmanship flourished. Luxury goods reflected mixed influences. Economic wealth sponsored cultural expression. Prosperity reshaped Parthian identity. Information traveled with commerce. Market news influenced political decisions. Awareness reduced strategic surprises. Knowledge became economic assets. Trade softened military rivalries. Even hostile powers traded indirectly. Economic dependence limited total war. Commerce restrained imperial destruction. Prosperity increased population mobility. People migrated toward opportunity. Labor followed trade routes. Economic zones expanded organically. Rural areas also benefited indirectly. Urban demand supported agricultural markets. Supply chains integrated countryside and cities. Economic unity strengthened empire. When trade slowed, adaptation followed. Routes shifted, alternative markets opened. Flexibility prevented economic collapse. Resilience defined Parthian success. Thus commercial exchange built Parthian prosperity. Not through exploitation, but connectivity. Trade sustained wealth, culture, and stability, a foundation for centuries of endurance. Parthian society reflected cultural fusion. Multiple traditions coexisted across empire. No single culture dominated completely. Blending became defining social characteristic. Persian heritage shaped social foundations. Ancient Iranian customs guided daily life. Royal traditions followed older Persian models. Continuity linked Parthia to past empires. At same time, Hellenistic influence remained. Greek ideas entered through Seleucid legacy. Art, architecture, and administration showed impact. Cultural interaction reshaped elite lifestyles. The Hellenistic culture influenced cities. Urban centers adopted Greek layouts. Theaters, columns, and public spaces appeared. Cities reflected Mediterranean aesthetics. Persian elements dominated rural regions. Local customs resisted complete Hellenization. Dress rituals and social norms persisted. Villages preserved ancestral traditions. Parthian rulers encouraged cultural balance. They avoided enforcing uniform identity. Adaptation mattered more than assimilation. Unity thrived through acceptance. Art reflected this blended identity clearly. Sculptures combined Greek realism with Persian symbolic themes. Visual culture spoke multiple languages. Coinage displayed cultural synthesis. Greek inscriptions appeared beside Iranian symbols. Kings wore mixed royal attire. Messages appealed to diverse subjects. Religion also showed blended expression. Local deities existed alongside foreign gods. Temples reflected mixed architectural styles. Spiritual life adapted organically. Elite education included Greek learning, philosophy, rhetoric, and administration. Yet Persian values shaped ethics. Dual knowledge enhanced governance. Marriage alliances reinforced cultural exchange. Greek and Iranian elites intermarried. Family ties softened cultural divisions. Social integration followed political strategy. Trade accelerated cultural blending further. Merchants carried ideas across regions. Customs traveled with goods. Exchange reshaped social outlooks. Language reflected blended environment. Greek remained language of prestige. Iranian dialects dominated local use. Bilingualism became common among elites. Festivals incorporated diverse traditions. Public celebrations mixed rituals and styles. Shared events fostered communal identity. Difference became normalized socially. This blending reduced cultural conflict. No group felt completely excluded. Flexibility prevented mass resistance. Cohesion emerged through diversity. Parthian identity remained deliberately fluid. Not rigidly Persian or Greek, but uniquely adaptive and inclusive. A civilization defined by synthesis. Thus Parthian culture thrived through balance. Persian roots met Hellenistic influence. Neither erased the other. Together they shaped enduring society. Religion played central role in Parthian life. Belief shaped ethics, rituals, and identity. Spiritual traditions guided daily behavior. Faith reinforced social cohesion. The dominant belief was Zoroastrianism. It traced roots to ancient Persia. Teachings emphasized moral responsibility. Good and evil defined cosmic struggle. Fire symbolized purity and truth. Sacred flames were carefully maintained. Temples protected these eternal fires. Worship centered around reverence, not idols. Priests held respected social positions. They preserved rituals and sacred knowledge. Religious guidance supported moral order. Authority rested on wisdom, not force. Core beliefs stressed ethical choices. Truth was opposed to deception. Righteous action determined spiritual fate. Morality influenced worldly conduct. Parthian kings supported Zoroastrian traditions, yet avoided strict religious enforcement. Royal patronage legitimized ancient practices. Faith strengthened political continuity. Ritual purity mattered deeply. Cleanliness symbolized spiritual discipline. Water, fire, and earth were protected. Environmental respect held religious importance. Funerary practices reflected religious values. Dead bodies avoided contaminating elements. Exposure rituals preserved sacred purity. Beliefs shaped end-of-life customs. Zoroastrian festivals marked seasonal cycles. Celebrations honored creation and renewal. Community gatherings reinforced shared identity. Religion united diverse populations. Sacred texts were transmitted orally. Priests memorized prayers and teachings. Oral tradition preserved flexibility. Local variations naturally developed. Zoroastrianism influenced legal principles. Truthfulness shaped justice administration. Oaths invoked divine witness. Law and faith overlapped socially. Military ethics were also affected. Courage, honesty, and loyalty were praised. Warriors saw duty as moral act. Faith reinforced martial discipline. Despite wide practice, beliefs were not uniform. Regional interpretations varied greatly. Local customs blended with doctrine. Religion adapted rather than imposed. Foreign influences subtly entered rituals. Hellenistic elements mixed occasionally. Symbolism evolved across generations. Faith remained dynamic and living. Zoroastrianism offered cosmic explanation. Human choice affected universal balance. Meaning extended beyond material life. Purpose guided individual behavior. The religion supported imperial stability. Shared values reduced internal conflict. Moral framework strengthened loyalty. Spiritual unity aided political cohesion. Thus, Zoroastrianism shaped Parthian society, not through coercion, but tradition. Faith guided ethics, governance, and culture, an enduring spiritual foundation. Parthian society embraced spiritual diversity. Many faiths coexisted peacefully. Religion was not tool of oppression. Tolerance defined imperial religious policy. The empire governed vast, diverse populations. Different beliefs existed regionally. Uniform worship was impractical. Acceptance ensured social stability. Zoroastrianism held cultural influence, yet it was not enforced universally. Kings avoided imposing single creed. Freedom reduced resistance and unrest. Greek deities continued to be worshipped. Hellenistic communities kept traditions. Temples remained active in cities. Cultural continuity was respected. Local cults thrived without interference. Regional gods retained sacred status. Ancestral rituals continued openly. Tradition was rarely suppressed. The religious tolerance strengthened unity. People felt protected rather than threatened. Loyalty followed respect for belief. Governance benefited from trust. Jewish communities practiced freely. Synagogues functioned without persecution. Legal autonomy was often granted. Minority rights were acknowledged. Early Christian groups also emerged, though limited in Parthian era. They faced less hostility than elsewhere. Relative freedom allowed quiet growth. Kings focused on political loyalty. Belief mattered less than obedience. Taxes, service, and peace were priorities. Faith remained personal choice. Priests of different religions coexisted. There was little organized religious conflict. Disputes were resolved locally. State rarely intervened. Religious tolerance encouraged migration. Persecuted groups found refuge. Population diversity increased steadily. Economy benefited from newcomers. Trade further supported tolerance. Merchants brought beliefs across regions. Exposure reduced fear of difference. Pluralism became normalized socially. Architecture reflected religious diversity. Temples, synagogues, shrines existed together. Sacred spaces shared urban landscapes. Cities became spiritual mosaics. This tolerance contrasted Roman practices. Rome often enforced imperial cults. Parthia avoided such imposition. Difference became comparative advantage. Religious freedom reduced rebellion incentives. Faith was not rallying point. Political dissent lacked spiritual justification. Stability increased across provinces. Tolerance also improved foreign relations. Neighboring states trusted Parthian neutrality. Diplomacy benefited from openness. Empire gained reputation for fairness. Thus Parthian religious policy was pragmatic. Acceptance preserved unity in diversity. Faith thrived without state control, a model of ancient coexistence. Language reflected Parthian cultural flexibility. Communication adapted to regional diversity. No single language dominated completely. Multilingualism became administrative strength. Greek remained language of prestige. It survived from Seleucid administration. Urban elites continued its use. Diplomacy relied heavily on Greek. The Greek language appeared on coins. Official inscriptions used Greek script. Royal titles were written bilingually. Messages targeted international audiences. Greek facilitated foreign relations effectively. Rome understood diplomatic correspondence. Trade contracts favored Greek terminology. Shared language reduced misunderstandings. Education among elites included Greek studies, philosophy, rhetoric, and governance texts. Knowledge enhanced political sophistication. Cultural literacy improved administration. Alongside Greek stood Parthian speech, an Iranian language used widely. It dominated rural and tribal regions. Identity was preserved through language. The Parthian language evolved organically. It absorbed regional dialect influences. Oral tradition strengthened its spread. Written use remained limited initially. Parthian was language of the court, spoken among nobility and warriors. It reinforced internal cohesion. Shared speech strengthened loyalty. Bilingualism was common among officials. They navigated multiple cultural spheres. Translation ensured effective governance. Flexibility reduced administrative friction. Legal matters often used local languages. Justice adapted to regional customs. Understanding mattered more than uniformity. Language policy remained pragmatic. Religious texts existed in multiple tongues. Oral prayers varied regionally. Sacred meaning transcended language barriers. Faith remained accessible to all. Trade required linguistic adaptability. Merchants learned multiple languages. Communication followed commercial necessity. Economic exchange encouraged multilingual skills. Military commands relied on shared signals. Language barriers were minimized. Visual cues replaced verbal orders. Coordination remained effective across tongues. Language diversity reduced cultural dominance. No group felt linguistically suppressed. Respect increased voluntary cooperation. Unity grew without assimilation. Over time, Parthian gained written form. Scripts adapted from existing systems. Cultural confidence increased gradually. Identity strengthened alongside inclusivity. Coins and inscriptions reflect transition. Greek prominence slowly declined. Iranian elements increased visibly. Language mirrored political evolution. Thus Parthian language policy was adaptive. Greek connected the world outward. Parthian bound the empire inward. Together they sustained cultural balance. Parthian society valued martial excellence. Warriors held highest social prestige. Nobility was defined by combat skill. Honor was earned through battlefield courage. Aristocrats were expected to fight personally. Leadership required visible bravery. Kings and nobles led from front. Status depended on martial reputation. From youth, nobles trained for warfare, horse riding, archery, and combat drills. Skill development began early. Warrior identity was lifelong pursuit. Land ownership supported warrior lifestyle. Estates funded weapons, horses, retainers. Wealth translated directly into military power. Economics reinforced martial hierarchy. Armor, weapons, and horses symbolized status. Elaborate equipment displayed noble rank. Appearance mattered alongside effectiveness. Visual power inspired loyalty and fear. Hunting served as military training. Nobles practiced riding and archery. Skills transferred directly to warfare. Leisure reinforced combat readiness. Social gatherings celebrated warrior values. Feasts honored victories and bravery. Poetry praised heroic deeds. Culture glorified martial success. Loyalty bonds formed between warriors. Personal allegiance outweighed abstract state. Leaders rewarded courage generously. Honor bound men to commanders. Military success justified political authority. Nobles gained influence through victories. Failure diminished social standing. Power depended on continued performance. Women of aristocracy supported warrior ethos. They managed estates during campaigns. Family honor depended on male bravery. Households sustained military culture. Warriors followed ethical codes. Courage, loyalty, and generosity were prized. Cowardice brought lasting shame. Reputation shaped social memory. Funerary traditions honored fallen warriors. Weapons accompanied burial rituals. Legacy extended beyond death. Memory preserved martial identity. Art depicted warriors prominently. Reliefs, coins, and statues showed arms. Royal imagery emphasized combat readiness. Visual culture reinforced values. This culture resisted foreign domination. Warrior elites valued independence fiercely. Submission threatened honor and status. Resistance became cultural instinct. Aristocratic warriors shaped military tactics. Elite cavalry reflected noble dominance. Combat style mirrored social structure. Society and warfare evolved together. Despite internal rivalries, unity emerged. External threats unified warrior class. Collective honor surpassed personal conflict. Defense of empire became shared duty. Thus Parthian culture was martial aristocratic. Warriors formed social and political core. Honor, land, and combat intertwined. A society forged through arms and loyalty. Relations between Parthia and Rome were complex. Neither peace nor war remained permanent. Conflict alternated with negotiation constantly. Rivalry defined their long interaction. The Roman Empire expanded eastward aggressively. Parthia blocked Roman ambitions repeatedly. Geography forced inevitable confrontation. Borders became zones of tension. Military clashes erupted frequently. Campaigns followed shifting political circumstances. Neither side achieved total dominance. Balance of power remained unstable. Wars were often indecisive. Victories brought prestige, not conquest. Defeats demanded diplomatic repair. Neither empire sought permanent destruction. Diplomacy followed every major conflict. Envoys negotiated prisoner exchanges. Tribute treaties and marriages occurred. Dialogue prevented endless warfare. Parthians preferred strategic containment. They resisted Roman encroachment carefully. Avoided unnecessary territorial overreach. Defense mattered more than conquest. Rome underestimated Parthian flexibility, expecting decisive infantry victories. Yet cavalry tactics frustrated Roman doctrine. Adaptation became necessary, but slow. Treaties recognized spheres of influence. Temporary borders were mutually accepted. Agreements rarely lasted long. Political change reopened hostilities. Internal Roman politics affected relations. Generals sought eastern glory. Personal ambition drove renewed wars. Parthia became proving ground for fame. Parthian internal struggles also influenced peace. Weak kings invited Roman pressure. Strong rulers restored balance quickly. Leadership qualities shaped diplomacy. Negotiation was seen as strength, not a sign of weakness. Parthians valued pragmatic outcomes. Survival outweighed ideological dominance. Rome respected Parthian sovereignty reluctantly. They treated Parthia as equal power, unlike other eastern states. Diplomacy reflected mutual recognition. Trade continued despite military rivalry. Economic ties softened extreme hostility. Merchants crossed borders even during tension. Commerce restrained total war. Military stalemates encouraged talks. Neither side could sustain endless campaigns. Logistics distance and course limited ambitions. Realism shaped strategic decisions. Repeated wars refined both militaries. Rome adapted cavalry tactics slowly. Parthians improved defensive coordination. Conflict drove military evolution. Peace periods allowed cultural exchange. Diplomats observed foreign customs. Knowledge transferred subtly. Rivalry bred understanding. Thus Parthian-Roman relations were cyclical. War followed peace, peace followed war. Diplomacy and conflict coexisted. A rivalry defined by balance, not conquest. Parthia occupied a crucial geographic position. It stood between powerful East and Western empires. Location shaped its global importance. Parthia became strategic intermediary. To the west stood Rome, to the east lay Han China. Direct contact between them was limited. Parthia filled the vast middle space. This position prevented direct Roman-Chinese conflict. Distance and terrain created natural separation. Parthia controlled connecting corridors. Balance depended on its stability. Parthians benefited from intermediary role. They regulated movement of goods envoys. Information passed through their lands. Control meant leverage over both sides. Rome relied on Parthian routes for silk. Chinese goods reached Mediterranean markets indirectly. Parthians managed this economic flow. Wealth and influence followed geography. Diplomatic messages also passed through Parthia. Envoys crossed imperial territory. Parthians observed global politics closely. Knowledge enhanced strategic awareness. Being a buffer reduced invasion risks. Rome and China avoided deep penetration. Costs and distance discouraged conquest. Parthia absorbed frontier pressures. Military focus remained regional, not global. Parthians defended borders efficiently. They avoided overstretching resources. Buffer status encouraged defensive strategy. Parthia balanced relations carefully. They avoided provoking total war. Maintained neutrality when beneficial. Pragmatism guided foreign policy. This position increased diplomatic value. Both empires sought Parthian cooperation. Recognition elevated Parthian status. Equality replaced subordination. Trade stability depended on Parthian peace. Disruption affected global commerce. This gave Parthia bargaining power. Economics reinforced political relevance. Parthians controlled cultural transmission. Ideas, technologies, and beliefs passed through. They filtered foreign influence selectively. Cultural mediation shaped civilizations. However, buffer role carried risks. Pressure came from both sides. Rome tested western borders frequently. Eastern nomads threatened intermittently. Strong leadership was essential. Weak kings invited foreign manipulation. Internal unity preserved buffer integrity. Stability remained strategic necessity. Parthian diplomacy emphasized flexibility. Alliances shifted when required. Rigid commitments were avoided. Survival depended on adaptation. Over time, this role defined identity. Parthia was more than regional power. It connected distant civilizations, a linchpin of ancient geopolitics. Thus Parthia functioned as global buffer, separating Rome and Han China. Its position shaped world history. Power derived from place, not size. Roman military pride centered on standards. Eagles symbolized honor and divine favor. Loss meant shame beyond defeat. Standards embodied Rome's imperial identity. During Eastern campaigns, Romans carried them proudly. Legions marched under sacred emblems. Soldiers swore oaths to protect them. Honor was inseparable from these symbols. At Carrhae, Parthians achieved unprecedented success. Roman formations collapsed under cavalry assault. Chaos spread across battlefield rapidly. Standards became vulnerable amid disorder. Parthian forces seized multiple Roman standards. This act shocked the Roman world. Never before had such loss occurred. Psychological impact outweighed material gain. The Roman standards held immense meaning. Their capture signified divine disfavor. Rome interpreted it as humiliation. Public morale suffered deeply. Parthians understood symbolic value immediately. They preserved standards carefully. Trophies became diplomatic instruments. Victory was displayed without words. Captured standards were paraded ceremonially. They demonstrated Parthian superiority visually. No need for written propaganda. Symbols spoke louder than proclamations. Rome demanded their return persistently. Diplomatic missions emphasized their importance. Recovery became matter of state honor. Negotiations spanned decades. Parthians used standards as leverage. They tied return to favorable treaties. Diplomacy replaced direct confrontation. Symbols shaped foreign policy. Eventually, partial returns were negotiated. Peace agreements included ceremonial exchanges. Rome presented recoveries as victories. Narratives were carefully managed. Despite recovery attempts, shame lingered. Memory of loss haunted Roman consciousness. Eastern campaigns became cautious thereafter. Confidence was permanently altered. Parthian prestige increased dramatically. They proved Rome could be humbled. Reputation spread across ancient world. Perception shifted in global politics. Standards were displayed in Parthian courts. Visitors witnessed Rome's humiliation. Diplomatic audiences absorbed message silently. Power was communicated through presence. This capture discouraged Roman overconfidence. Future generals respected Parthian tactics. Infantry dominance was questioned. Military doctrine began slow adaptation. The event influenced Roman propaganda. Later emperors sought symbolic revenge. Eastern policy became more calculated. Honor demanded careful restoration. For Parthia, this was lasting triumph, not merely a battlefield success. Symbolic victory echoed across generations. Legacy endured beyond territorial control. Thus, captured Roman standards reshaped relations. Honor, diplomacy, and memory intertwined. Parthia struck Rome's symbolic heart. A victory measured in prestige, not land. Armenia stood between two great powers. Its location made it strategically vital. Control meant influence over eastern frontiers. Rivalry focused intensely on this region. Armenia was neither fully Roman nor Parthian. Local kings ruled with external backing. Allegiance shifted with political pressure. Stability remained constantly fragile. The Armenia served as buffer state. Both empires sought friendly rulers. Direct annexation risked major war. Indirect control became preferred strategy. Parthians supported Arsacid relatives as kings. Blood ties ensured political loyalty. Dynastic marriages reinforced influence. Family politics shaped international relations. Rome countered with its own candidates. Roman-backed kings promised Western alignment. Military intervention enforced Roman claims. Armenia became chessboard of diplomacy. Borders shifted with each conflict. Victories installed new client rulers. Defeats reversed political alignment. Territory rarely changed permanently. Local Armenian nobility played both sides. They sought autonomy above all. Support shifted toward strongest patron. Survival guided political decisions. Military campaigns often targeted Armenia first. It served as testing ground for power. Control signaled regional dominance. Loss implied strategic weakness. Parthian cavalry excelled in Armenian terrain. Plains allowed mobile warfare advantage. Romans struggled adapting to geography. Tactical differences shaped outcomes. However, mountainous regions favored defense. Roman fortifications proved effective there. Neither side achieved total control. Balance persisted through geography. Treaties frequently referenced Armenia's status. Agreements outlined neutral arrangements. Shared influence was sometimes accepted. Compromise prevented escalation. Armenian kings acted as mediators. They balanced obligations carefully. Appeased both empires when possible. Diplomacy became survival art. Parthian influence peaked periodically. Strong kings asserted dominance regionally. Weak leadership invited Roman advance. Leadership quality mattered immensely. Population endured constant political change. Allegiances shifted without cultural upheaval. Daily life continued, despite power struggles. Local resilience ensured continuity. Over time, Armenia symbolized rivalry itself. Neither empire could fully claim it. Conflict remained unresolved permanently. A contested frontier shaping relations, thus shifting Armenian borders defined competition. Not conquest, but influence mattered. Control was political rather than territorial, a frontier of diplomacy and war. Parthia and Rome viewed each other cautiously. Neither dismissed the other as inferior. Rivalry was tempered by recognition. Respect underpinned constant competition. Both empires represented different strengths. Rome excelled in discipline and organization. Parthia mastered mobility and adaptability. Each acknowledged the other's advantages. The geopolitical rivalry shaped relations. Conflict was strategic, not emotional. Wars tested balance rather than annihilation. Survival mattered more than domination. Rome treated Parthia as equal power. Unlike smaller Eastern kingdoms, diplomacy reflected parity of status. Envoys negotiated rather than commanded. Parthians also respected Roman resilience. Legions endured hardships with discipline. Defeats did not end Roman resolve. Persistence earned reluctant admiration. Military encounters bred mutual learning. Rome slowly adapted cavalry tactics. Parthians refined defensive strategies. Rivalry accelerated military evolution. Neither empire sought total conquest. Costs outweighed potential gains. Distance strained logistics severely. Pragmatism limited imperial ambition. Victories were celebrated symbolically. Prestige mattered more than territory. Honor influenced political narratives. Public image shaped imperial confidence. Defeats prompted caution, not collapse. Both sides absorbed losses strategically. Recovery followed through reform. Resilience defined imperial maturity. Diplomatic rituals emphasized equality. Gifts, titles, and ceremonies exchanged. Protocol acknowledged sovereign status. Symbolism reinforced mutual recognition. Trade continued despite rivalry. Economic interdependence softened hostility. Merchants crossed contested borders. Commerce restrained absolute enmity. Cultural curiosity accompanied competition. Romans observed Eastern customs. Parthians studied Roman politics. Understanding grew alongside conflict. Border regions reflected shared influence. Art, architecture, and practices blended. Rivalry produced cultural exchange. Opposition did not prevent interaction. Propaganda emphasized victories selectively. Failures were reinterpreted domestically. Narratives preserved imperial pride. Public memory was carefully managed. This rivalry stabilized Eastern frontier. Neither empire collapsed the other. Balance prevented unchecked expansion. Stalemate became strategic equilibrium. Later powers inherited this dynamic. Rome's Eastern policy was shaped permanently. Parthia set enduring precedents. Rivalry influenced centuries of geopolitics. Thus Parthian-Roman relations balanced respect, competition without total war, recognition without submission, a rare ancient rivalry of equals. Parthian governance avoided strict legal uniformity. Empire ruled many diverse regions. Single law code was impractical. Flexibility ensured long-term stability. Local communities retained traditional laws. Customs guided daily legal matters. People trusted familiar justice systems. Resistance against rule was reduced. The Parthian Empire respected regional traditions. Imposed laws risked rebellion. Tolerance encouraged voluntary loyalty. Law became tool of inclusion. Village councils handled minor disputes. Elders applied customary judgments. Community authority remained intact. Central courts rarely interfered. Urban centers followed established legal norms. Greek cities used Hellenistic laws. Iranian regions followed ancestral customs. Pluralism defined legal structure. Royal authority intervened selectively. Only major political crimes mattered centrally. Treason, rebellion, foreign collaboration. Everyday justice stayed local. This system reduced administrative burden. No vast legal bureaucracy was needed. Local governance remained efficient. Empire saved resources and effort. Judges were respected community figures. Their legitimacy came from tradition. Trust outweighed formal legal training. Social harmony guided rulings. Punishments varied by region. Custom determined severity and method. Uniform penalties were unnecessary. Justice reflected cultural expectations. Nobles often oversaw regional courts. Their authority reinforced legal outcomes. Loyalty ensured fair administration. Power and justice were intertwined. Appeals to king were rare. Royal judgment symbolized ultimate authority. Presence discouraged abuse of power. Fear of intervention maintained balance. Legal diversity strengthened imperial cohesion. No group felt culturally erased. Identity remained protected under rule. Unity formed through respect. Foreign observers misread this system. They assumed weakness or disorder. In reality, it ensured cooperation. Law adapted to geography and culture. Maintaining local laws eased expansion. New regions integrated without disruption. Conquest did not mean cultural destruction. Acceptance followed continuity. Law enforcement relied on reputation, honor, and shame-regulated behavior. Social pressure replaced heavy policing. Community norms ensured compliance. Even taxation followed local practice. Rates methods collection varied regionally. Economic customs were respected. Stability increased across provinces. When conflicts arose between traditions, compromise solutions were preferred. Rigid enforcement was avoided. Peace outweighed legal purity. Thus Parthian legal policy was pragmatic. Local laws preserved under imperial umbrella. Justice adapted rather than imposed. A cornerstone of durable governance. Marriage was powerful political instrument. Union strengthened bonds between ruling elites. Family ties replaced constant warfare. Diplomacy entered private life. Parthian kings married strategically. Spouses came from noble houses. These unions secured regional loyalty. Blood ties ensured political commitment. Marriage alliances linked king and nobility. Great families gained royal connection. Kings gained noble support. Mutual benefit stabilized internal politics. Vassal rulers were integrated through marriage. Daughters and sons were exchanged. Kinship reduced rebellion risk. Family loyalty reinforced imperial unity. Foreign diplomacy also used marriage. Alliances softened hostile relationships. Trust was built through shared lineage. Conflict was delayed or avoided. The marriage alliance shaped governance. Personal relationships influenced state decisions. Family honor became political obligation. Private bonds carried public consequences. Arsacid dynasty used marriages carefully. They avoided empowering single family excessively. Balance was preserved through distribution. Political equilibrium remained intact. Queens often came from influential houses. They acted as mediators. Their presence eased noble tensions. Court politics relied on their influence. Marriage legitimized rule in new regions. Local elites accepted royal relatives. Foreign rulers appeared less alien. Integration followed familial connection. Children of such unions symbolized unity. They embodied mixed regional identities. Succession gained wider acceptance. Opposition weakened naturally. Marriage reduced administrative costs. Loyal relatives governed regions. Trust replaced bureaucratic oversight. Efficiency increased through kinship. However, alliances carried potential danger. Powerful in-laws could challenge throne. Family rivalries sometimes escalated. Kings managed relations carefully. Divorce or remarriage held political meaning. Such actions signaled shifting alliances. Court observers read intentions closely. Marriage decisions were never private. Marriage diplomacy extended across generations. Agreements outlived individual rulers. Long-term stability followed continuity. Family trees mirrored political maps. Women played critical diplomatic roles. They carried influence between families. Their status ensured communication channels. Soft power operated through marriage. Cultural blending increased through unions. Customs, languages, and beliefs mixed. Social integration followed political strategy. Unity grew within diversity. Marriage alliances complemented military power. They secured loyalty without violence. Peace became achievable through kinship. Politics softened through personal ties. Thus marriage was governance tool, not romantic but strategic. Family bonds shaped imperial stability. Diplomacy lived within households. Diplomacy played vital role in Parthian strategy. War was not only means of interaction. Envoys carried messages across vast distances. Dialogue balanced conflict and cooperation. Parthian kings maintained formal embassies. Messengers represented royal authority. They negotiated peace, trade, and honor. Diplomacy preserved imperial interests. Contacts with the Roman Empire were frequent. Envoys discussed prisoners' borders and treaties. Ceremonial exchanges reinforced equality. Protocol emphasized mutual respect. Embassies followed elaborate rituals. Gifts symbolized goodwill and status. Luxury items impressed foreign courts. Symbolism communicated power without force. Parthians understood Roman political culture. They adapted language and etiquette accordingly. Miscommunication was carefully avoided. Diplomacy required cultural intelligence. Eastern diplomacy extended toward Han China. Direct contact was rare but meaningful. Messages traveled through intermediaries. Parthia facilitated long-distance diplomacy. Chinese envoys sought Western alliances. They desired secure trade routes. Parthians welcomed diplomatic contact. Shared economic interests guided talks. Embassies also served intelligence purposes. Envoys observed foreign military strength. Court politics and internal divisions. Information shaped future strategy. Travel for embassies was long and dangerous. Deserts, mountains, and hostile territories. Successful missions demonstrated state capability. Logistics proved imperial reach. Diplomats were carefully selected nobles. They possessed linguistic and cultural skills. Honor and discretion were essential traits. Failure could mean political disaster. Negotiations often lasted months. Deliberation was preferred over haste. Patience reflected diplomatic maturity. Agreements required careful consensus. Parthians avoided binding permanent treaties. Flexibility allowed policy adjustment. Changing circumstances demanded adaptability. Diplomacy remained dynamic, not rigid. Gifts exchanged carried political messages. Acceptance implied recognition of status. Rejection signaled displeasure. Subtle signals guided relations. Embassies reinforced Parthia's global relevance. They showed empire was not isolated. Participation in world politics increased prestige. Recognition mattered as much as power. Even during warfare, embassies continued. Negotiation channels were rarely closed. Dialogue prevented total breakdown. Crisis management relied on communication. Diplomatic success enhanced royal legitimacy. Kings appeared wise and capable. Peaceful outcomes strengthened internal loyalty. Foreign respect validated domestic rule. Embassies also facilitated cultural exchange. Ideas, technologies, and customs traveled. Courts learned from one another. Diplomacy enriched civilization. Thus, Parthian diplomacy was sophisticated. Envoys balanced war and peace. Roman China recognized Parthian importance. Communication sustained imperial standing. Parthian administration avoided heavy bureaucracy. State structure remained intentionally simple. Complex systems were seen as burden. Efficiency mattered more than paperwork. There was no vast centralized administration. Few permanent offices existed. Local governance handled most responsibilities. Center intervened only when necessary. The king relied on personal authority. Decisions flowed through relationships. Trust replaced written regulation. Human networks governed empire. Officials were often nobles or local elites. They governed regions using personal influence. Appointments were based on loyalty. Merit and lineage mattered equally. The bureaucracy was deliberately minimal. Parthians distrusted rigid administration. Flexibility allowed faster response. Adaptation outweighed formal procedure. Tax collection remained decentralized. Local rulers gathered tribute. Central treasury received agreed portions. Oversight stayed limited but effective. Record keeping was not extensive. Oral agreements carried authority. Reputation ensured compliance. Honor functioned as enforcement mechanism. This system reduced administrative costs. No large salaried class existed. Resources were saved for military needs. State remained economically lean. Limited bureaucracy encouraged autonomy. Regions solved problems independently. Local knowledge guided decisions. Efficiency improved at ground level. However, this model required strong leadership. Weak kings struggled enforcing authority. Personal rule lacked institutional backup. Stability depended on individual capability. Communication relied on envoys and messengers. Written orders were rare. Face-to-face negotiation was preferred. Personal presence reinforced command. Judicial matters followed similar pattern. Local courts operated independently. Central review was exceptional. Justice remained community-based. Foreign observers misunderstood simplicity. They assumed disorder or weakness, yet empire endured centuries. Functionality proved effectiveness. Bureaucratic rigidity often caused revolts elsewhere. Parthia avoided this risk deliberately. Light governance reduced resentment. People felt less controlled. Military command benefited from simplicity. Orders were clear and adaptable. Commanders acted independently. Speed replaced hierarchical delay. Economic regulation was equally flexible. Trade adapted to local conditions. Markets self-regulated largely. State intervened only when required. This model suited Parthian geography. Vast distances discouraged micromanagement. Autonomy was practical necessity. Administration followed landscape realities. Thus, limited bureaucracy defined Parthian rule. Not a flaw but strategic choice. Simplicity enabled resilience. Governance thrived through trust and flexibility. Parthian rule relied on personal loyalty. Authority flowed through trusted relationships. Obedience mattered more than written law. Political bonds sustained imperial order. Tributes replaced direct administrative control. Regions paid agreed resources, gold goods, or military support. Payments symbolized acceptance of authority. Local rulers kept internal autonomy. In return, they pledged loyalty. This exchange defined governance. Power was negotiated, not imposed. The tribute system shaped imperial control. Regular tribute affirmed subordination. Failure signaled rebellion or defiance. Economics and politics were inseparable. Loyalty was demonstrated through action. Military assistance proved commitment. Counsel at court showed allegiance. Presence mattered as much as payment. Kings rewarded loyal subjects generously. Titles, land, and prestige were granted. Rewards reinforced personal bonds. Generosity strengthened political ties. Disloyalty brought swift consequences. Tribute refusal triggered intervention. Military force restored authority. Examples discouraged wider rebellion. This system reduced need for coercion. Fear alone was insufficient. Mutual benefit ensured cooperation. Stability emerged through reciprocity. Tribute amounts varied by region. Wealth and productivity were considered. Flexibility prevented economic strain. Fairness maintained long-term loyalty. Local elites collected tribute themselves. This preserved their authority. Central power avoided direct involvement. Governance remained indirect yet effective. Court ceremonies reinforced loyalty. Tribute presentations were public rituals. They displayed hierarchy and order. Symbolism reinforced political reality. Loyalty extended beyond economics. Hostages, marriages, and alliances reinforced bonds. Trust was layered and reinforced. Multiple mechanisms ensured compliance. Governance adapted to changing rulers. New kings renegotiated loyalties. Tribute reaffirmed legitimacy. Continuity required renewed allegiance. Foreign vassals followed similar model. They acknowledged Parthian supremacy. Autonomy remained largely intact. Empire expanded influence without annexation. This system suited nomadic traditions. Personal allegiance held cultural importance. Written contracts mattered less. Honor-bound political relationships. However, loyalty was fragile under weak kings. Strong leadership was essential. Charisma maintained allegiance. Authority required constant reinforcement. Tribute funded military readiness. Resources supported cavalry and defense. Economic flow sustained power. Governance directly fueled warfare capability. Thus Parthian governance rested on loyalty, tribute replaced rigid administration. Power functioned through relationships, a flexible system sustaining a vast empire. Internal conflict weakened Parthian stability. Power struggles emerged within royal family. Succession lacked clear fixed rules. Rival claims divided imperial leadership. Arsacid kings often faced challengers. Brothers, cousins, and nobles competed. Royal bloodlines became sources of conflict. Unity eroded from within. The Parthian Empire suffered repeated civil wars. Each conflict drained military resources. Authority appeared increasingly fragile. Enemies observed growing weakness. Succession disputes followed many reigns. No strict law governed inheritance. Strength and support decided kingship. Violence replaced orderly transition. Noble families exploited these conflicts. They backed rival claimants strategically. Support was traded for privileges. Dynastic chaos empowered aristocracy. Short reigns became more common. Kings ruled briefly before overthrow. Instability prevented long-term planning. Governance became reactive, not strategic. Civil wars damaged provincial loyalty. Regions questioned central legitimacy. Some withheld tribute or support. Fragmentation accelerated decline. Military commanders chose sides. Armies were split between claimants. External defense suffered severely. Internal wars weakened borders. Repeated conflicts exhausted population. Tax burdens increased to fund wars. Economic pressure fueled resentment. Public support for dynasty declined. Royal authority lost sacred image. Kings appeared as warlords. Legitimacy depended on force. Respect eroded across society. Foreign powers exploited divisions. Rome intervened diplomatically and militarily. Border pressure increased during conflicts. Internal weakness invited external threat. Dynastic conflict undermined command unity. Generals acted independently. Coordinated defense became difficult. Strategic coherence collapsed gradually. Each civil war reduced imperial prestige. Victory no longer restored stability. Cycle of conflict repeated endlessly. Healing never fully occurred. Political assassinations became frequent. Court intrigue replaced open governance. Trust disappeared among elites. Fear dominated royal politics. Local rulers grew increasingly autonomous. They sensed weakening central power. Loyalty became conditional. Empire shifted toward fragmentation. Attempts at reform failed repeatedly. No ruler remained long enough. Opposition blocked consolidation. Momentum toward collapse continued. Dynastic conflict eroded Arsacid authority. Foundation of empire cracked internally. Strength dissolved before external conquest. Decline began from within the throne. Central authority gradually lost effectiveness. Kings struggled enforcing imperial decisions. Distance and autonomy reduced compliance. Control weakened across vast territories. Parthian governance depended on strong rulers. When kings lacked authority, regional elites ignored royal commands. Power shifted away from center. Local nobles governed independently. They collected tribute selectively. Military support became unreliable. Loyalty was conditional, not absolute. The centralization was never fully achieved. Parthian system favored decentralization. Strength required exceptional leadership. Average rulers could not sustain it. Communication across empire was slow. Orders arrived too late. Situations changed rapidly. Local decisions replaced central planning. Provincial rulers maintained private armies. These forces answered personal interests. Royal command held limited influence. Fragmentation increased steadily. Tax and tribute enforcement weakened. Some regions delayed payments. Others reduced contributions unilaterally. Treasury revenues declined sharply. Military campaigns suffered coordination failures. Armies assembled inconsistently. Regional commanders acted independently. Unified strategy was rare. Court authority became symbolic. Edicts lacked enforcement power. Respect for throne diminished. Fear replaced loyalty in politics. External defense weakened visibly. Border regions felt abandoned. Local rulers negotiated independently. Foreign influence expanded quietly. Central weakness encouraged internal rebellion. Challenges emerged without hesitation. Consequences were often delayed. Deterrence lost credibility. Noble families filled power vacuum. They became de facto rulers. Royal oversight was minimal. Empire resembled loose confederation. Succession crises worsened control issues. New kings struggled asserting authority. Opponents resisted centralization. Instability reinforced decentralization. Attempts to reassert power failed. Military force was insufficient. Loyalty could not be compelled. Structural weakness persisted. Common people felt distant from throne. Imperial identity weakened socially. Local identities strengthened. Cohesion dissolved gradually. Economic coordination also declined. Trade routes lacked protection. Infrastructure maintenance suffered. Commercial confidence decreased. Foreign powers sensed vulnerability. Rome increased pressure diplomatically. Eastern rivals advanced cautiously. Balance of power shifted. Weak central control undermined resilience. Empire could not respond collectively. Crises multiplied without coordination. Collapse became increasingly likely. A new power emerged in southern Iran. Local rulers challenged Arsacid authority. They claimed stronger cultural legitimacy. Change began from regional ambition. The Sassanian Empire rose from Persis. Its leaders traced lineage to ancient kings. They promoted revival of Persian traditions. Ideology strengthened their claim to rule. Sassanid rulers criticized Parthian weakness. They condemned decentralization openly. Strong monarchy was their promise. Order replaced perceived chaos. Ardisha challenged Parthian governors first. He consolidated power locally. Victories attracted wider support. Momentum built rapidly. Zoroastrian identity was emphasized. Religion unified political authority. State and faith became intertwined. Legitimacy deepened through belief. Sassanid military organization was disciplined. Infantry and cavalry coordinated tightly. Central command ensured unity. Contrast with Parthian fragmentation was stark. Many nobles defected to Sassanians. They sought stability and favor. Arsacid loyalty eroded quickly. Support shifted toward rising power. Parthian kings underestimated this threat. Initial responses were delayed. Local revolts were ignored. Danger grew unchecked. Ardisha expanded methodically. He defeated regional rivals first, then confronted imperial authority. Strategy ensured gradual dominance. Propaganda framed Sassanians as restorers. They promised revival of ancient glory. Achaemenid memory was invoked. National sentiment was mobilized. Parthian military response lacked coordination. Regional forces failed to unite. Command confusion hindered defense. Opportunity was lost. The Sassanians gained popular support. Merchants, clergy, and warriors aligned. Stability attracted followers. Change appeared inevitable. Royal charisma strengthened Sassanid cause. Leadership was decisive and visible. Confidence inspired loyalty. Parthian kings appeared distant. Battle victories legitimized new dynasty. Success reinforced ideological claims. Power validated ambition. Authority followed strength. Neighboring regions recognized new power. Diplomatic attention shifted quickly. Parthia lost prestige. International perception changed. The rise exposed Parthian vulnerabilities. Decentralization became fatal flaw. Strong rivals exploited weakness. Transition of power accelerated. Thus Sassanid ascent marked turning point. Old order could not adapt. New centralized empire replaced it. Parthian era neared its end. Final conflict sealed Parthian fate. Years of decline culminated in battle. Resistance was fragmented and weak. Outcome became increasingly inevitable. The last Parthian ruler struggled for unity. Regional allies failed to respond. Noble support was inconsistent. Royal command lacked authority. Ardisha confronted Arsacid forces directly. Battle tested remaining Parthian strength. Military coordination was insufficient. Defeat followed strategic disarray. The Arsacid dynasty lost final legitimacy. Loss symbolized end of authority. Royal image collapsed publicly. Power shifted decisively. Parthian cavalry could not compensate. Numbers were reduced drastically. Training and morale declined. Former advantages disappeared. Commanders acted independently again. No unified strategy emerged. Orders were ignored or delayed. Chaos replaced coordination. Key provinces fell rapidly afterward. Local rulers surrendered willingly. Resistance lacked leadership. Collapse spread quickly. The battlefield defeat echoed politically. Nobles switched allegiance openly. Survival outweighed loyalty. Dynasty lost remaining supporters. Royal treasury was depleted. Funds for defense were scarce. Armies could not be sustained. Material weakness ensured failure. The king's authority became symbolic. Titles remained without power. Court influence vanished. Reality overtook tradition. Military loss ended diplomatic standing. Foreign powers recognized new ruler. Parthia lost international recognition. Era closed definitively. Attempts to regroup failed quickly. No strong heir emerged. Opposition blocked recovery. Time favored the Sassanians. Public perception shifted decisively. New dynasty promised order. People accepted change readily. Hope replaced uncertainty. Sacred legitimacy transferred to victors. Religious support reinforced transition. Authority appeared divinely favored. Symbolism mattered greatly. Former Parthian elites adapted. They integrated into new regime. Continuity survived through change. Elite survival ensured smooth transition. This defeat ended centuries of rule. Arsacid legacy concluded. Military failure finalized decline. History marked irreversible turning point. The year to 24 CE marked final collapse. Centuries of Parthian rule ended. Political authority transferred permanently. An era closed in Iranian history. The Arsacid system could not recover. Internal decay reached critical level. No reform reversed decline. Momentum favored complete replacement. Final transition occurred decisively. No prolonged resistance followed. Change was swift and definitive. Power shifted without prolonged chaos. Parthian institutions dissolved gradually. Courts, armies, and administration disappeared. Symbols of authority lost meaning. Imperial identity faded rapidly. Regional rulers accepted new reality. They pledged allegiance to new power. Survival guided political choices. Continuity mattered more than loyalty. The capital cities changed hands. Administrative centers were restructured. New officials replaced old elites. Governance followed new ideology. Military traditions were absorbed selectively. Some Parthian cavalry practices survived. Others were abandoned deliberately. Innovation followed consolidation. Religious policy shifted significantly. State ideology became more centralized. Faith reinforced royal authority. New legitimacy replaced old tolerance. Foreign powers recognized regime change. Diplomatic relations were re-established. Old treaties became void. International order adjusted accordingly. Trade routes continued functioning. Commerce adapted to new rulers. Economic life did not collapse. Stability returned gradually. Parthian culture did not vanish entirely. Art, customs, and traditions persisted. Society carried layered identities. Change was political, not total. Historical memory reinterpreted Parthian past. Later chroniclers criticized decentralization. Failures were emphasized retrospectively. Legacy became cautionary example. Yet Parthia shaped future governance. Its successes informed later reforms. Its failures guided centralization efforts. Influence endured beyond fall. The end represented transformation, destruction. Iranian statehood evolved further. Political continuity remained culturally rooted. History moved forward through adaptation. By 24 CE imperial torch passed. One dynasty replaced another. Old order yielded to new vision. Cycle of empires continued. Parthian Empire ended officially, but its impact remained deeply embedded. Institutions, ideas and strategies survived. End became beginning of another chapter. The Parthian Empire left lasting legacy. Its impact shaped ancient world profoundly. Though often underestimated by historians, its role was strategically decisive. Parthia stood as Eastern counterweight. Roman expansion met firm resistance. No unchecked conquest moved eastward. Balance of power was preserved. Rome respected Parthian strength deeply. Eastern ambitions were carefully calculated. Fear replaced confidence on frontier. Limits of empire became clear. Military success relied on innovation. Parthians mastered mobile warfare. Cavalry dominated open battlefields. Speed replaced rigid formations. Their mounted archers changed warfare. Hit and retreat became doctrine. Enemies struggled to adapt tactics. Battlefields favored Parthian strategy. Heavy cataphracts symbolized elite power. Armor and horses formed shock units. Combined force overwhelmed opponents. Cavalry supremacy defined their image. These methods influenced later armies. Roman tactics slowly evolved. Eastern warfare traditions spread widely. Legacy lived through adaptation. Parthia connected distant civilizations. Trade routes linked continents. Ideas moved with merchants. Cultures met across borders. East and West exchanged knowledge. Art, religion, and technology traveled. Parthia enabled this interaction. Civilizations learned through contact. Silk, spices, and metals passed through. Economic exchange shaped global awareness. Parthia was silent facilitator, a bridge more than conqueror. Cultural tolerance defined imperial rule. Diversity was managed, not erased. Multiple traditions coexisted peacefully. Unity formed without uniformity. This model influenced future empires. Later Persian rulers observed closely. Strength came from balance. Control did not require oppression. Administrative lessons were inherited. Flexibility proved more durable. Rigid systems often collapsed faster. Parthia demonstrated alternative governance. Militarily, their legacy endured. Cavalry remained Persian strength. Later dynasties refined techniques. Innovation continued across centuries. Politically, Parthia showed restraint. Empire without total domination. Influence mattered more than annexation. Soft power shaped stability. Their rivalry with Rome was unique. Neither destroyed the other. Mutual recognition prevailed. Ancient balance of equals emerged. Despite this importance, Parthia is overlooked. Sources remain limited and biased. Roman narratives dominate history. Eastern perspectives faded unfairly, yet archaeology restores forgotten story. Coins, art, and ruins speak. Evidence confirms imperial sophistication. Silence does not mean insignificance. Parthia protected Iranian identity. Between Hellenism and Rome, cultural continuity was preserved. Foundation for a future revival formed. Without Parthia, Persian resurgence may fail. Historical bridge was essential. Transition required stability. Parthia provided that space. Their fall did not erase influence. Successors inherited structures, ideas. History flowed, not broke. Legacy passed through transformation. Modern historians reassess Parthia. Importance gains renewed recognition. Narrative slowly corrects imbalance. Justice returns to forgotten empire. Parthian legacy is resilience. Adaptation over domination. Balance over excess. Strategy over spectacle. They shaped ancient geopolitics quietly, without monumental propaganda. Yet outcomes prove lasting. Power does not always shout. Thus Parthia deserves remembrance. As guardian of Eastern balance, as master of mounted warfare, as vital force in world history, the Parthian Empire may have fallen, but its influence endured. History remembers through consequence. Legacy outlives political collapse.